I run an educational media company. We produce 5-minute videos about different topics we believe that the world should be aware of. We produce videos about history, political science, just anything that we believe would make a person whole and more knowledgeable and savvy in this world.
PragerU says 60% of their audience is under 35. About 35 PragerU videos are currently restricted.
When we first realized that our videos were being restricted, there were about 15 videos that were restricted, and that was a year and a half ago. And since then, not only has the issue not been resolved, there's actually been 20 more videos restricted. And currently, it's closer to 40 videos that are being restricted. And after nothing really happening for weeks and weeks, we kept pressing them. And then they eventually told us, well, after reviewing your videos, we determined they're not appropriate for a young audience, which was really troubling to us at PragerU, because if you've seen any of our videos, they're very educational and they're very appropriate for a young audience.
They have placed our videos on their restricted list. That means that it can't be viewed in libraries, in schools, or any home that filters out pornography, for example. Cannot be seen in any of those places. Our videos are as innocent as exists on the internet. 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, professors from Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale, and they still said inappropriate, but we still don't understand why.
You think when you Google something, everything on that subject comes up. I mean, it's in their mission statement. They say we organize the information of the world and make it universally accessible to all. They don't do that because they don't make ours accessible.
When I learned YouTube had been denying access to its platform to PragerU's videos, I said, I think the only way you're going to get honest answers and gain the access that the First Amendment would require is if, in fact, you start getting people through discovery in a lawsuit.
I almost feel like we're being bullied because being silenced is such a frustrating feeling. This is not just about PragerU being silenced. This is about another point of view that is being silenced. Tomorrow it's going to be your point of view that's being silenced. Is Google the one who gets to decide what everybody gets to watch?
So Alex Jones got deplatformed, and we did a video. Of course, it was amazing video. People love it. And well, here's what we warned about. What would happen? So people on the left who are cheering this on don't think about the unintended consequences. It's like they've never read a book about censorship. They've never seen it in a movie about how it happens, the backlashes, the unintended consequences. Just oh, I don't like Alex Jones, so I like this. And so we said this yesterday. This is what we said yesterday Monday when we were doing our report on this. Here's what we predicted.
I'm going to add this as another side note, and I want to pose this question because here's another reason why I'm confused why the people that don't like Alex Jones were being celebratory here. Do you think that at the end of the day, this is going to help him?
This helps him.
I think so too.
Of course this helps him. And, well, we said this. So to all the people on the left who are applauding Facebook and YouTube and never stop to consider the unintended consequences, I told you so. And what did I tell you so? InfoWars becomes the 4th most popular Apple News app in U.S. after crackdown from tech companies. Are you happy? Are you happy? Now he's a martyr. Now when he says that the establishment is colluding and there's a conspiracy against his message, there actually is. It actually solidifies his space for him. And it gets him more viewers. It gets him more people. Look. First of all, Ron, congratulations on that prediction.
Thanks.
And it came true. And
I didn't realize I was losing my hair that much, but it's important that I see this stuff.
it is important. It is important. It's tough to lose your hair. I know, Ron. I'm one of those guys. Katie, what did you think this would help him like this? What do you make of it?
Well, I was thinking while you were saying that, like, there is some kind of cost-benefit analysis, right? Because there are certain things that someone would do that we would all agree needs to be, like, banned, right? There are certain things.
Like what?
Like a really specific incitement of violence,
Yeah.
right? So that, even though, let's say someone banned him or deplatformed him, and it made him more popular, we'd still have to probably juggle those two things. In other words, like making him popular per se doesn't show it's the wrong thing to do. It is a bad side effect, bad byproduct. But what I also think is interesting is watching the left and the right respond to this, because I think it's complicated, but the best part is the right, which is
I've exhausted my ability to understand why deep into the 21st century, I'm still hearing otherwise good-hearted people use the same arguments white Southerners used to discredit Uncle Tom's Cabin more than 150 years ago. It couldn't possibly have been that bad. Maybe this is what happens when a person's only news source is the alternative universe of Fox and Friends, or maybe they're all just racists. Okay, they're definitely all racist. So this isn't a very leftist article, but it's coming under fire from the left. Why? Because here is the point. They don't believe they are. And the problem with writing off people who don't recognize this country's pervasive and enduring culture of white supremacy, much less the ways in which they themselves benefit from it, is simple. Being called a racist almost never causes a racist to wake up. Being called a racist almost never causes a racist to say, oh, wow, you're right. I get that it's hard not to scream racist at a racist. If you're a white person who wants to be an advocate, it's both infuriating and demoralizing to know that the people causing all the suffering are people who look just like you. But here's what is also true. Prejudice is endemic to humanity itself. Human beings are tribal creatures. We trust the familiar and are drawn to it. We distrust the unfamiliar and keep our distance. White people, liberal and conservative, often claim not to notice another person's race, but it's just not true. We are hardwired to recognize difference and to view it as an aberration. Noticing difference is not the same thing as hating difference, of course, but I'm not just talking about vicious white supremacists here. I'm talking about garden variety prejudice. And the answer that this lady says is maybe yelling racist at people is not actually a good idea. Because when you yell racist at people, all you are doing is alienating people. This author says, take a breath. When you encounter a person who believes he's merely honoring his ancestors by driving a car with an image of the Confederate battle flag on the tag, when a Facebook friend announces it's disrespectful to take a knee during the national anthem, when you sit down next to someone at a church picnic who genuinely loves and respects the black people they know, but who consistently votes for politicians with overtly racist policies, stop for a moment and take a breath. Before you say a single word, think of all the times you made an assumption about a stranger that proved to be untrue. Think of the times you found yourself feeling uneasy in the company of strangers of another race. Okay, so this is not only a reasonable article, it's a far left article, right? It suggests that all of these are elements of racism, but the best way to fight all of that is not to yell racist to people. The left says that this is a huge mistake. Right? The left says that if you yell racist at a bunch of non-racist white people, that's totally fine. But if you say anything racist about a member of another race, then it's racism. There's this article in the New York Times in which it says, maybe you don't want to call all white people racist. And the left goes mad. Why shouldn't we call all white people racists? Instead, we should point out that when people are racist, they're racist. Okay, so here's an article from Linda Tirado over at the Daily Beast. And this is fascinating. She says, poverty doesn't make you racist. It's more that the exhaustion strips you of the ability to dissemble for long. So if you're inclined toward racism already, it shows. A life lived close to tears of sheer fatigue and stress is not one in which you can expend the energy to stop yourself spouting your resentments or wielding your fears as a weapon. So in other words, some people choose racism, poverty doesn't cause racism, but individuals are responsible for their own.
For YouTube, because it turns out YouTube is a really good breeding ground for things like extremism.
No offense, but f*** the Pope.
Hate speech.
They have less crime than other towns. Yeah, because there's less blacks.
And conspiracy theories.
Well, the left's been saying they're going to start killing all the conservatives.
For one, it's a click-based market. So creators are incentivized to be as sensational and inflammatory as possible to get the attention of viewers. With normal vloggers, it's clickbaity thumbnails and headlines like, my Uber driver is in love with me. With right-wing YouTubers, it's videos like the left and Islam unholy alliance. Or Hillary tied to bizarre occult spiritual spirit cooking ritual. Here, I'll click that. Independent bloggers also have zero obligation to fact check themselves, provide evidence, or face debate. Unlike Fox News or talk radio, YouTubers don't require broadcast licenses, so they're immune to FCC rules prohibiting them from distributing obscene or false information, which is why 5 of the 10 most viewed videos about the Las Vegas shooting are conspiracy theories.
This is from high-level CIA. Right here. You know I don't make sources up.
YouTube also pushes people down ideological rabbit holes. The site is designed to show you more of what you just watched. So if you click on a Lawrence Southern video about immigration, the next video that autoplays is about white genocide. And from there, it gets a lot worse. Normally, the check on this kind of garbage would be advertisers. Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh can be jerks all they want, but at the end of the day, their bosses have to worry about corporations freaking out and pulling their ads. But YouTube is different. Advertisers rarely know what videos their ads are going to show up on. For the most part, YouTube manages that relationship, assigning ads to videos and paying creators accordingly. So if Southern is getting money from a Wix ad playing before her video about the end of white people, she never even has to talk to them, and they likely don't know she exists. But that relationship between YouTube and creators is changing. In March this year, a group of 250 brands pulled back from YouTube after reports that their ads were appearing before extremist content, including white supremacist videos. As a result, YouTube demonetized a ton of videos without much explanation. Political content creators, including ones who weren't peddling hate or conspiracy theories, were affected by it.
We were basically making nothing on YouTube. Existential threat to the show.
And people freaked out. They called it
the adpocalypse.
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 Most people that are in politics in general, I'm talking left-wing and right-wing, their salary has been halved just because of the whole adpocalypse situation where advertisers don't want to touch anything remotely controversial.
And it wasn't just demonetizing. In August, YouTube announced new guidelines for how it would deal with hateful content, stating that these videos, quote, won't be recommended, won't be monetized, and won't have key features including comments, suggested videos, and likes. Southern calls that
shadow banning is happening.
These moves have gotten blowback from basically everyone.
They're trying to censor conservative media, nationalist media on YouTube.
Telling the truth is just not advertiser friendly.
And that's because there's really no good way.
I'm sure you've heard the saying that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you, and they're after me. They want me banned from the internet now that Alex Jones has been unpersoned. Check out this video from Vox. Vox, if you don't know, is a huge media conglomerate. They own 300 different websites, including SB Nation, The Verge, Polygon, Eater, Recode, etc. Here's the PBS NewsHour reporting on Alex Jones' disappearance from social media, and then calls me an Alex Jones imitator.
This morning, Jones broadcasted a Periscope message in response to his being kicked off the social media platforms.
They disappeared me. Like I've been airbrushed out of, those old Soviet photos with Stalin, and as he killed each person, he had them airbrushed out. I mean, if this isn't 1984, baby, I don't know what is.
Jones has spawned hundreds of imitators, mostly right-wing, anti-government conspiracy theorists, peddling merchandise and the real story the government doesn't want you to know about.
Love him or hate him, Alex is like the canary in the coal mine, and these big tech companies conspiring together to In fact, the federal judge recently ruled that President Trump cannot block people on Twitter, no matter how bad they troll him, because Twitter's considered a public forum. After some of his worst trolls got blocked for their incessant trolling, and they sued and won. A Manhattan federal judge said that his personal account with a reply button is a public forum. Blocking users on the basis of political speech is a violation of their free speech rights, the court said. CNN even admits that they were the ones who pressured tech companies to ban Alex Jones and InfoWars. Their senior media reporter, Oliver Darcy, just tweeted, "It's important to note that the tech platforms did not enforce their own rules and take action against Alex Jones and InfoWars on their own accord. It took media outlets to point out for weeks that InfoWars was skirting the rules on these tech platforms for them to enforce their own standards." And they continue to tattle on Alex Jones to Twitter, trying to get him banned from the only platform so far that hasn't done it. This is from CNN.com yesterday. CNN on Wednesday morning presented Twitter with examples of such content available on both the InfoWars and Alex Jones account. A spokesman at the time said the company had no comment beyond the statement that Jack Dorsey made on Tuesday, in which he said neither Jones or InfoWars had violated our rules. But CNN has taken it upon themselves to decide that Alex Jones has violated Twitter's rules. Twitter says that InfoWars hasn't violated our rules. It looks like that's not the case. Meanwhile, I've been getting a flood of emails from Twitter because people keep reporting my account for hate speech, for things like calling LeBron James a moron and saying that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a crazy-eyed lunatic. Like Alex Jones says, this is an info war, an information war, and it's just starting to heat up. If you guys enjoy these enforcing their own policies. I'm sorry, but these social media services and video sharing platforms are essentially 21st century public squares, and shutting
on the left might take this out of context of defending the right wing. Because independent media is so important. I don't want to go back to a world of gatekeepers, and I don't want to go back to a world where the only things that you're allowed to say is how honorable the politicians are and how we need to have bipartisan agreement in Washington about how they're going to rob us blind, etc. So if we're just talking about right wing attacking the left, Democrats, have at it, Hoss. But even progressives as a category. I mean, you know that the right wing has done that for decades now. Libtards, feminazis, etc.
Yeah, who cares about that? That's not what we're having a conversation about.
No, I know, and that's why I'm being really careful here to make sure people understand where we stand, because the right wing and the Alex Jones supporters, etc., will twist things, right? Yeah. And they will pretend, they'll create a straw man argument pretending they're against right wing speech. No. I am in favor of protecting right wing, left wing, any kind of speech along those lines. The issues come into play when it gets to two things. One is hate speech and the other is harassment. I will probably have a different standard than everybody's got their own standard, but then YouTube and Facebook will have. I don't necessarily think that hate speech should be regulated. So now a lot of people will disagree with that. Now, we fight against hate speech every single day. That's part and parcel of what we do. Leave that job to us. We will win that battle, and we'll win in the free marketplace of ideas. When it comes to harassment, to me, that's a totally different issue. When you attack the Sandy Hook parents, and you talk about how
they're actors,
and they live here, and you should go find them. And the Posners that are suing Alex Jones had to move 7 times. Their 6-year-old son was murdered, and then they are harassed all throughout the country by followers of this maniac.
A woman who is an Alex Jones viewer was sentenced to 5 months in prison because she was harassing the Posners. She was convinced because of Alex Jones that these people are crisis actors, that it was all a false flag operation by the government in order to take guns away from Americans. I mean, that's the kind of nonsense this guy spews on his show on a regular basis. I will never stand up for that kind of speech. You want to hate on liberals, have at it. You want to hate on me specifically, have at it. But if you're going to spew defamatory BS and encourage people to harass individuals who have already been victimized, they just lost their 6-year-old son. You're gonna encourage them to go after these people and harass them? No, I'm not gonna protect that. And I'm happy that these platforms finally have enough of a backbone to do something about it, because conservatives have made a whole profitable industry out of this, right? Oh, we care about free speech so much.
Made by the globalist, elitist, leftist lizard people, meant to suppress free speech and the truth. And by the truth, of course, I mean things like peddling conspiracy theories like Pizzagate, promoting that. Also that time when I said, the murdered kids from Sandy Hook, they were crisis actors. Or maybe, I guess more recently, like when InfoWars blamed the wrong person for being the Parkland shooter.
And that's the most of the voice I'm gonna do. As far as my real opinion, I'm personally surprised it took so long for Alex Jones and InfoWars to be banned. I am hyper aware of how incredibly, hilariously memeable Alex Jones is, whether it be, they're turning the frogs gay, or any of the other stuff. And the unfortunate side effect of that is we kind of minimize or normalize this person as kind of this ridiculous court jester, even though we're talking about this person with a massive audience who has put out massive fake news like calling Sandy Hook a hoax. And if I was in YouTube's position, YouTube was mine, I would not have given my megaphone to him. But as far as my personal opinion of am I happy to see those guys gone, I'm honestly still trying to battle it out in my head. On one side of my brain, I have to acknowledge that all of these tech companies, they are private companies, they are well within their rights to remove someone from their platform, and it is not a violation of the First Amendment. They are deciding if they are going to give you their megaphone or not. And it appears that all of the companies are doing all of this. The conversation is not about fake news, because the argument there could always be, we thought we had it right, we had it wrong, or there's a certain thing that it's up for debate or it's an opinion. Whereas with harassment, you're not saying if something is true or not, you're just protecting someone, right? The argument there is that you're removing an abuser, right? And in response to this, all the people that love Alex Jones and or InfoWars, they may never use these services ever again, right? The free market decides, all of a sudden those people go, I don't want to support your private company, I'm going to go directly to him and support his private company. But on the other side of things, where these tech companies end up hurting themselves is with the vague reasons. They say harassment, glorifying violence, dehumanizing language, but they almost never point to specific videos or specific posts. Now, most likely part of their specific reasoning here is when you point to specifics, you create definitive lines in the sand, and so if you have a bad actor that's trying to abuse your system, they kind of know where to take it to the line and still get across what they want to get across. But at the same time, it would be nice to know what the rules are so you know if you are breaking them or not. And so when you say something like hate speech towards Muslims or transgender people, what specifically did they say, and what do you deem as a company hate speech? Are you talking about slurs? Are you talking about people that have the opinion that a transgender person, that there's something mentally wrong with them? As a company, are you seeing that as an opinion, or are you seeing that as hate speech? Do you consider it hate speech if someone calls, let's say, a trans man a woman, right? They misgender, maybe it's on purpose, maybe it's on accident. And so the thing is, when these companies do not cite these specifics and they just read policy, it feels like they are setting up a system that can be easily abused. And while obviously we're talking about Alex Jones and InfoWars, which is an outlier, an extreme organization comparatively, once again, my opinion, I feel it's understandable why there is fear and concern. Now understand when I say that I'm not equating all conservative outlets
on their platforms. In other words, if they are over applying particular standards against conservatives while not applying them all against other groups that have far more egregious violations of their terms of service, then they are, in my view, exercising editorial control. Now, if that turns out to be the case, and I'm sure this will be adjudicated in a court of law at some point in the not too distant future, if it turns out that that is the case, then they become legally liable for what is posted on their platforms, which means that their platforms cannot survive. Like, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars of shareholder value could conceivably be wiped out. I don't know why shareholders aren't up in arms and revolting and calling emergency shareholder meetings and holding the boards of these companies to account and saying, what the hell are you doing? You're threatening my life savings. You're threatening my wealth, my investment, my children's future. You're threatening everything. Why? To deplatform people who are conservatives mere months before the 2018 American midterm elections. Of course, that's what it's all about. You understand that. Alex Jones has been doing what he's doing for decades. Now, right before the midterms, when the Russia collusion narrative is collapsing in on itself, when the Mueller probe looks to be the partisan hack job that I believe that it is, what are they doing? Well, they can't win the argument, so they merely silence the opposition. This is a Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan style takedown. Can't beat honestly, and therefore will beat dishonestly. And of course, we've all seen these examples where they say, oh, such and such a conservative promoted this or that, or was bad, or hate speech, or whatever. But you can see for yourself. There are, on various social media platforms, Antifa message boards where they openly plot and plan political violence, which is the definition of terrorism. Open terrorist networks. There are jihadi recruitment sites all over the place, which are not being shut down, which are not being deplatformed, which are not being erased. The great Candace Owens took a couple tweets from the woman recently hired by the New York Times, which was railing against white people and saying the most unbelievably hateful and racist things about white people, replaced white people with black people, and was immediately banned. So of course they're exercising editorial control, in my humble opinion, because I'm an empiricist, and that's what the data very clearly shows. So no, they don't get to do that and maintain immunity from legal liability for the content of their sites. Because if they're so sensitive to conservatives saying supposedly hateful or devastating things, but they don't exercise that same